not our regular meeting day, and she had a plan. I think she's out of town. And thank you to everyone who's here. We have a few more people present, and we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing is that we'll have a call to order, and Erica will help us with the roll call.
Sure, I'll announce the roll. Chair O'Neill has informed us that she will be absent. Vice Chair Smith Crivello.
Present.
Commissioner Collum.
Here.
Commissioner Dawson.
Here.
Commissioner Humbero.
Here.
Commissioner Rath.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez has also informed us that he will be absent.
Okay, so
Staff present, staff present, Kimberly Cole, Christy Sabdo, Recording Secretary Cleary, and myself, Administrative Assistant Erica Barrera.
okay, the meeting procedures, we have consent items. Are there any consent items?
You know what I'd like to do right before that? If you, Jennifer, could read into the record on how to participate this afternoon. So if people would like to pull consent items, we can ask.
Members of the public are encouraged to join our meetings via Zoom Gov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. This meeting is also streamed live on youtube.com/City of Monterey. There is a 10-second delay, and Comcast channel 25. If you'd like to provide public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone, making sure to join in time to accommodate delays. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. Since the meeting has started, you'll find the agenda under the Recent tab. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. The webinar ID for this meeting is 161-739-7120. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name they type into Zoom. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak. Please turn off the TV or computer speakers or go to another room while connected, as background noise interferes with the broadcast. Public speakers will be called upon in order of their hands raised. There is a 3-minute time limit for today's meeting. Please stay within that time limit.
Okay, then we're going to again open the consent agenda. And it seems to me that we usually have the minutes first, but is that after people speak? Okay. So is there any discussion of the minutes? Everyone's had a chance to get them and read them. Any discussion from the people on Zoom? Lori, for example.
I do not see any hands raised on Zoom at the moment. I'll take this time to ask if our public viewers in person would like to comment on the minutes from August 12th of 2021. I would say there's no
Okay,
interest
I'd be
in
glad
that.
to hear a motion.
I move, sorry.
Go ahead.
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
And I'll second.
Okay, Carol Dawson moved, and we have a second. So are we all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented?
And we would like to conduct a roll call vote for that. So,
Okay,
Erica, if you could please do that.
so there will be a roll call vote on the minutes.
Okay. Chair O'Neill is absent. Vice Chair Smith Crivello.
Yes.
Commissioner Collum.
Yes.
Commissioner Dawson.
Yes.
Commissioner Humbaro.
Yes.
Commissioner Rath.
Yes.
And Commissioner Rodriguez is also absent.
Okay, so 5 yes votes, the minutes have been approved, right?
The minutes have been approved. Thank you.
Okay. And next on the consent item, we have public comments. And prior to public comments, do you want to read that again, or are we good for public comments now in terms of how the public can participate? Because she just read it, but we also have a few other instructions if you're tuning in from home. At this time, the public may speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on any subject which is within the jurisdiction of the Monterey Historic Preservation Commission and which is not on the agenda. So if you're coming here to speak on something that is on the agenda, there'll be a time for that a little bit later. You may do this, or we have received some letters, but most of those address items on the agenda. So you can come up to the podium or let us know through Zoom how you want to, when you want to participate. And we'll do the best we can to acknowledge everybody. Again, you can speak once for up to 3 minutes.
This is for items not on the agenda. I'd like to take this time to introduce how members of the public can join via Zoom once again. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, toll free, then enter the webinar ID. The webinar ID is 161-739-7120. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom.
So is there anyone here today that wants to speak on any item not on the agenda? Anybody not here that wishes to speak? Please use the process that you've been informed about. I don't hear anybody or see anybody.
We do not see any hands raised currently in Zoom, and it appears that nobody from the public wants to comment. If I'm incorrect, please raise your hand or stand up. Nope, I think it's
Okay, we'll move ahead to our regular public hearings. And this is how we're going to do it. The staff will give a presentation. The commissioners may ask questions of the staff member. The applicant or the applicant's representative may make a presentation, and the commissioners may ask questions of the applicant. It's open for public comments. And there's some discussion, some comments made, and then there's a vote. So we'll begin the process with 999 Belden Street. And this was presented to the commission at our last meeting. So if you have a copy of the minutes, you can review that. I think the staff's going to tell us what we need to do. So Christy, that's your project.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Crivello and Commissioners. My name is Christy Sabdo, Associate Planner with the City of Monterey, and I bring before you 999 Belden Street to approve findings reflecting the HPC decision made on in August of 2021. Staff recommends that the Historic Preservation Commission adopt a resolution approving findings reflecting the August 12th Historic Preservation Commission decision denying removal of 999 Belden Street from the new Monterey Historic Context Statement and Reconnaissance Survey List as decided by the HPC in August. On August 12th, the Historic Preservation Commission denied application HP 210079 to remove 999 Belden Street from new Monterey Reconnaissance Survey. However, HPC did not adopt findings for denial of the application. Staff has drafted a list of findings for the HPC to consider adopting based on deliberation of the application at that meeting. And the findings include 4 findings. The uniqueness of Monterey is the wide variety of houses represented, and it is important to protect individual houses. Finding 2, the house is unique and representative of post-war growth of New Monterey. Finding 3, the fact that the house is dilapidated should not disqualify it from being historic. Finding 4, the house maintains integrity. Staff recommends the adoption of the findings as reflected in the August 12th, 2021 meeting.
Are there any questions by the commissioners to the staff's report? Thanks for your report. Okay, we'll close that part and ask the applicant if they'd like to make a presentation if they're here today. I don't see the applicant here.
I'm pretty sure the applicant's not going to be here today.
Okay, and so are there any other members of the public that would like to ask a question or have a comment? I mean, basically it's having a comment. And now we're ready. I don't hear anybody on the screen.
Once again, to join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers in the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. Webinar ID is 161-739-7120. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom.
Thank you. We haven't seen anyone on the screen that wants to participate. We don't have anyone here.
Sorry, there are currently no hands raised. Does anyone in person want to comment on this item, 999 Belden? I do not believe so. I think it's safe to move on.
Okay, are there any commission comments? 2 of us here voted a different way. We may not have, reasons why we wanted this decision, but the 2 that voted for it should probably be the ones that want represented. So,
I
Carol?
had a comment. I'd like to beef up finding number 4 by.
Can you
stating
use
some-
your microphone? They're
Oh,
saying they can't
it's
hear you.
on, but you can't
Maybe
hear
just
me.
a little bit closer. Thank
Oh,
you.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. By changing it to something like, as stated by Dr. Kirk in his report, the house maintains historic integrity of location, setting, design, materials, workmanship, and feeling. Make it a little bit stronger. So if there's no other discussion, I would move that we approve it with that change.
Any second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. How do we vote? All in favor?
Actually need to do a roll call vote because we're doing the hybrid meeting
That's
and
right.
some of
I
our
will- I
commissioners
think
are online.
I'll do the vote. Chair O'Neill is absent. Vice Chair Smith Crivello,
Aye.
Commissioner Collum,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Humbaro,
Aye.
Commissioner Rath,
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez is absent. This motion passes with a vote of 5.
Okay, we'll move to item 4. Consider 650 Camino El Estero /700, so it's 650 Camino-700 Camino El Estero, Marsh Building, known as the Marsh Building. Historic permit 21-0104 to allow exterior alterations, repairs, and recertify the historic preservation report. The applicant is Lisa Lorono with SVR Incorporated. The property owner is Mary Nix-Sarian, and it is a PCDH1 zoning designation, public, semi-public, general plan designation. It is exempt from CEQA requirements per section 15301, class 1, Section 15303, Class 3, Section 15331, Class 31. So we'll start again with the staff presentation.
Thank you. My name is Christy Sabdo with the City of Monterey. I will be presenting 650 700 Camino El Estero. Applicant Lisa Lorano with SVR Incorporated is requesting approval for alterations to the exterior of a historic site. And staff recommend that the Historic Preservation Commission adopt a resolution to consider 650 700 Camino El Estero historic permit to allow exterior alterations and repairs and recertify the historic preservation report. The subject property is located in between Cortez Street and Camino El Estero along Fremont Street. The project was originally zoned C2, H1. The historic survey indicated that the resource, the GT Marsh building, is locally and nationally significant under the national and California registers. The downtown specific plan was adopted in October 2013, rezoning all properties within the downtown planning area to PCD, so Planned Community Downtown Specific Plan. The GT Marsh building retained its H1 status with the downtown specific plan rezoning. The property is now zoned PCD H1. The GT Marsh building is significant in the area of history as the last remaining store of the GT Marsh chain of Oriental art galleries that stretched from the San Francisco to San Diego in the early part of the 20th century. It is also significant for the contribution of George Turner Marsh in introducing commercial Oriental art to the United States in 1876. Marsh's Oriental art store is significant in the area of architecture as a singular example of a type of early Northern Chinese residential architecture to be found in California for its high artistic value and because its construction was supervised and executed by Japanese craftsmen. Here's a photograph of the pre-renovation of the building in 2006. And here is a present day picture of the building after the renovation. A historic preservation report has been adopted for the GT Marshall Oriental Art Store. The appropriate treatments for which the historic resale shall be preserved, rehabilitated, restored, and reconstruction are outlined in this report. This report has expired, and historic preservation reports are only in effect for a period of 3 years from the date of adoption. The Historic Preservation Commission may extend or readopt an approved program for periods of 3 years or less. The approval of a historic preservation report shall be based on the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties and shall include a number of items, which is in your report. On July 12th of 2007, the Historic Preservation Commission approved Historic Permit 07241, approving a new handicapped entrance into the Marsh building. And then in November of 2013, HPC adopted 2 resolutions, a historic permit and a use permit. The historic permit allowed minor interior alterations, including construction of interior doors and walls to create 2 additional apartments within the existing building. And the use permit waived 2 parking spaces for the 2 apartments. More recently, work was performed without a historic permit. The applicant provided a letter describing the work. Minor areas of rot from termite damage around the windows were removed and replaced with new cedar. Affected window sills were sanded and repainted to match the existing color. New tile on the balcony was replaced because it had previously been installed incorrectly without proper waterproofing and was loose and cracked. The applicant is requesting a Historic Preservation Commission approval for alterations to the exterior of the historic site. The proposed exterior alterations and repairs are needed to protect the historic building from further storm damage and includes removal of roof tiles where roof leaks during rain events, replacement of the roof sheathing, waterproofing, and tiles, removal of wall covering where wood has rotted from leakage and replacing in kind. So to describe the work, looking at the aerial photograph here, the area outlined in purple, the tiles, it's 600 square feet of tiles will be removed from the purple roof area and used to replace tiles on the main building. Any leftover tiles will be placed for future tile replacements that are needed. And what will be replaced on the, where this shows the purple roof area, is the blue CO tiles. And we actually have an example of the tiles here in person if you'd like to look at them.
One might be
believe it's both.
original, one might be the replacement.
CO1 blue. Yeah, I think it's the smaller
This
one.
is the replacement.
So these tiles will be placed where it's highlighted purple. We're passing around an example now. Pretty heavy. You could just leave it beside you. Thank you. And then the area highlighted in yellow, there will be removal of existing gold Chinese tiles from the top of this wall to make repairs to the wall along the wall that's located adjacent to the street on Camino El Estero, the more visible wall. And then the Chinese gold CO2 tiles will replace where they've been removed, the yellow highlight. We can circle back for questions later if it's not clear. So the Historic Preservation Report, the current one, meets the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties, and includes all of the required elements as required by the code. So I'll walk through the findings briefly. The proposed project is consistent with standard 1 and that the proposed project roof and wall repairs does not affect the building use. The proposed project is consistent with Secretary of Interior standard 2 and that the historic form and character of the historic resource will be preserved. The proposed rehabilitation of the building, including roof and wall repair, is needed to protect the historic building from further storm damage. Original tiles will be removed from roof elements and walls that are less visible from the street to replace tiles on roof elements and walls that are more visible from the street. Where roof tiles are being removed, they will be replaced with tiles that match the original tiles. Walls will be repaired and finished with stucco consistent with the original wall materials. The proposed project is consistent with Secretary of Interior Standard 3 and that no such elements are proposed for this project. The proposed project is consistent with Secretary of Interior Standard 4. The qualified professional architectural historian concludes the proposed work by SBR will not obscure, damage, or destroy important character defining features of the historic building complex and is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties under the standard for rehabilitation. Proposed project is consistent with Secretary of Interior Standard 5 and that no such features will be affected by this project. The qualified professional architectural historian concludes the proposed work, just as I read before. Proposed project is consistent with Standard 6 and that historic features are being repaired. Original tiles will be removed from roof elements and walls that are less visible from the street to replace tiles on roof elements and walls that are more visible. Where roof tiles are being removed, they will be replaced with tiles that match the original tiles. Walls will be repaired and finished with stucco consistent with the original wall materials. The proposed project is consistent with Secretary of Interior Standard 7 and that no such treatment is proposed by this project. And the proposed project is consistent with Secretary of Interior Standard 8 and that improvements do not result in site excavation or grading. The proposed project is consistent with Secretary of Interior Standard 9 and that no new additions are proposed. Exterior alterations would not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. And the qualified professional concludes that the work will not damage or destroy important character defining features. The proposed project is consistent with Secretary of Interior Standard 10 and that no new additions or related new construction are proposed, only repairs are proposed. The project is consistent with the general plan and that the project site has a general plan designation of public, semi-public. The proposed exterior alterations and recertification of the historic preservation report do not impact the site's general plan designation. The property is located in the downtown specific plan, Royal Presidio District. The district includes nationally significant historic resources, including the GT Marsh Building. The project is consistent with this plan as it involves repairs to a historic building. The project site has a zoning designation of PCD with an H1 historic landmark overlay district. The project complies with all development standards applicable to the H1. The historic preservation ordinance requires that any alteration proposed to an H1 zone property receive a historic permit, and that's what is being requested today. Staff recommends adoption of the resolution to consider a historic permit for 650 700 Camino El Estero to allow exterior alterations and repairs and recertify the historic preservation report. And the applicant is here as well to answer any questions and maybe make a brief presentation.
Great, thank you. Are there any commissioner questions for the staff regarding the report that we just heard? Carol?
Hi. I'm wondering, the new tiles are matching the existing. Is there any need to differentiate between the new ones and the existing?
That's a good question for the architectural historian.
Oh, the new tiles match the existing
Right.
tiles. Is there any requirement that they're differentiated from each other? So we know which ones are the new ones and which ones are the old ones?
Ken Seavey, Historic Preservation Consultant for the project. At issue here is a series of roof sets that were put on in 1928. They were put on with Portland cement. What has happened was the initial concern was we would remove the tiles back only so far as to allow the people who were repairing the wood and getting to the stucco to stop the water penetration. Go back that far, which they said they needed that space to work in. However, it was almost impossible to remove the Portland cement that had been laid in for a period of time. And so the 3 feet went back to about 10 feet for loss of tile, simply because of the attempt at carefully removing the original tile. So what we've got is a situation where we have a 1928 roof that has been in the weather for that period of time, and the potential of putting in some brand new tile out of China that match the original existing, but in point of fact, which don't match the current. So our job is to remove existing tiles on what you saw was a square roof that have been in the weather, and to replace those in the location where you have the weathering. And then on the full new surface, you would have the new tiles. So you'd have 2 sets, and the second set would clearly differentiate on that square one, but the others would conform to the vast majority of tiles found on the roof. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
that makes sense. Thank you.
And if I'm here, any other questions?
No,
This-
we're
I
we're
will
glad
say-
it's being restored and people enjoy seeing the building. It's
Yes, and the owner has been extremely positive with this. She's expended a considerable amount of money to do everything the way it should be done, and unfortunately was not done by the previous owner.
Oh,
You know, this is a gem. Marsh was an amazing figure in California history. You go to the tea house in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, Marsh did the tea house. He had more than 5. He had one in Tijuana and he had one in San Diego, as well as here and down in Santa Barbara. So we're it, and we're the gateway to Monterey. And if we're interested in cultural tourism, besides golf and the cars, and we want to invite people in, we have all of Asia represented at the front door in one of the finest examples of Chinese architecture in the United States.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question on the letter you wrote, September 13th. you referenced in B, you recertified the June 14th, 2006 plan, which included approval for removing the tiles. And was that completed at that time? Were the tiles taken off? And was the sheathing, waterproofing, everything?
Not been completed. It's been open because we've been waiting patiently for this meeting to occur since June.
No, but I'm wondering if this occurred in 2006.
So I can maybe offer a little bit there.
Maybe.
So the preservation programs are basically master plans. So the city can approve permits and we have an overall view. Not all of the work outlined in that 2006 or 07 plan was completed. I know they did some waterproofing, but not near the amount. They're now experiencing additional leaks and there's additional repairs that are needed. Interestingly enough, it's still consistent with the original plan, the approach, but all of the repairs were not completed at that time.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out if,
Timing.
you know, if the tiles had been in the same position since it was built, or if this had occurred in around 2006, the plan had been put into action, and if this, and then I thought, boy, that's a short amount of time for any roof, especially one that's as durable as
They
this.
didn't replace.
They didn't
roof.
do it.
But
Okay.
I think Christy showed at the beginning of the presentation, sort of the before and after.
Mhm.
There was substantial rehabilitation done sort of between 2006 and I think about 2008, which really saved the building from neglect. So this is just an additional maintenance item that's become more acute in the last year.
Thank you.
And even more acute now in the rainy season.
Hopefully.
Our lead for the tiles for the final repair on the one roof are, we think, 2 months by order in China for actual fabrication, and then however long it takes to get it here, given the circumstances of the food chain today. So what we intend to do is protect that square roof with waterproofing until we get the new tiles, but get these tiles on. Now, the 2 sections of the main roof are protected currently and waterproof. But we've got to get that stuff off and in as fast as we can so that we save that wall, that cloud formation. That's cloud, wind, and water. And that's from one of the most important parts of North China. And I'm not even sure if some of that stuff's still left. It's probably high rises by now. So we've got a gym that's facing immediate problems from a weather system that we don't know how long it's going to last. And all we're really asking for is to reopen the permit we already have to conduct this repair.
Yes, I understand. I was just wondering if some things had been done in, you know, fairly recently and where we were on that. Thank you for all of your contributions to the project. So let's go ahead and I have another question. Kent, are you serving as the owner's presentation?
Yes.
So that was kind of, you went ahead and offered yourself for any questions representing the owner?
Yes.
Okay, so ordinarily then we would have the applicant, and we have heard from Kent. So do you have any questions for Kent at all? Is there anybody with any questions? I guess we can move on to any public comments.
Once again, to join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. The ID for this meeting is 161-739-7120. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. It looks like we do have a hand raised. and I'll allow them to talk. Christina, you can go ahead and speak.
They're still muted.
Will we hear them?
We do have an applicant with their hand raised right now. We've allowed them to unmute themselves, but they are not doing so. So Christina, if you are on the line still and can hear us, please unmute yourself and present your comments to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Hello?
We hear you now. Thank you for joining.
No worries. I'm actually waiting for the next home, 456 Belden Street. I just wasn't sure if you guys knew we were on the thing because you said there was nobody who joined via Zoom. So sorry, I'll wait to raise my hand at the right time.
Thank you for clarifying. We will be taking public comments for that item as well. I would recommend lowering your raised hand until that item is called.
I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're back on our schedule unless there are other public comments.
We do not have any other hands raised currently. I will take this moment to ask the public joining us in person today if anyone here wants to provide public comments live. And everyone's shaking their head, so I think it's your time to move on. Thank you.
I'd like to call for a motion.
Okay, I'll move to approve the historic permit 21-0104 for 650 Camino El Estero, 700 Camino El Estero for exterior changes attached to the Exhibit A and recertification of the historic preservation report based on the following findings.
I'll second that.
All in favor? We have to do this orally.
Sure, we'll do a vote. Chair O'Neill is absent. Vice Chair Smith Carvello.
Aye.
Commissioner Collins,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Humbero, Commissioner Humbero,
She's muted.
Tell her she's there.
Had to unmute. Okay, yes.
Commissioner Rath,
Aye.
and Commissioner Rodriguez is absent. This motion passes with a vote of 5.
Okay, so the motion carries. And that moves us to 5.
Before we move on, this item is appealable to the Planning Commission on forms available at the Planning Office within 10 days of the date of this decision.
And I'm sorry, one more question. Who was it that placed the second?
I did.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Shall we move on?
Let me just get the roofing materials for the applicants so they can take them with them.
Okay. Thank you for coming and thank you for your work on that building. I know I speak for many people. People enjoy the building
Yes.
and
Very much.
I haven't had the pleasure of going in, Jeff has. he's the owner of the PR. And he's worked very
But I need to share my screen.
So which
The
Okay.
next item, thank you, Vice
so
Chair Collins.
that's number 5, consider 580 Calle Principal. Applications MA 21-0117 and TM 21-0120 for Millsack contract and rezone H-1 historic landmark overlay zoning and historic permit application HP 21-0135 for rehabilitation And in parentheses, minor repairs and alterations, including new window openings and adoption of a historic preservation report done by applicant Merritt Hawley of MAP Architect, owner Blake Matheson, Ravens Path, PCD zoning district commercial general plan designation. It is exempt from CEQA per Article 19, Sections 15.301, 15.305, 15.331, Classes 1, 5, 31. So we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Thank you. My name is Christy Sabdo, Associate Planner with the City of Monterey. I'll be presenting 580 Calle Principal, the Miller Adobe. Applicant Merritt Howley, on behalf of owner Blake Matheson, is requesting approval of an H1 landmark resource overlay zoning, a Mills Act contract for the Miller Adobe, historic permit for rehabilitation and adoption of a historic preservation report at 580 Calle Principal. Staff recommends that the HPC adopt resolutions recommending that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt an ordinance to rezone the property as a landmark historic resource from PCD to PCD H1, recommending that the City Council approve a Mills Act contract, approving a historic permit HP 210135 for a rehabilitation and adopting a historic preservation report. The property is located between Pacific Street and Calle Principal. The property is zoned PCD currently. The intensive survey and historic preservation report were prepared by architectural historian Seth Bergstein. The Miller Adobe was constructed in 1874 and is a two-story hipped roof commercial building constructed in the Monterey colonial style. The property qualifies as a landmark historic resource under National Register Criteria A and California Register Criteria 1, association with significant events, patterns, or trends. The property is associated with the early American Monterey period as it was constructed in 1874. The home has been identified as the last adobe constructed in Monterey. The National Historic Landmark District and Downtown Historic Context Statement establishes the historic significance of the project site under the theme of early American Monterey. The Monterey City Code criteria H1 landmark zoning may be applied only to properties that meet the National Register of Historic Places criteria, and the property is the first, last, only, rare, or most significant resource of its type in the region. Also, the H1 landmark zoning district may be applied to adobe resources built prior to 1879, which may not meet the criteria, the National Register integrity standards. Here are a few photographs of the site. This is along the Calle Principal frontage. The first floor of the building is adobe with a wood framed second story with horizontal wood siding. The primary elevation located along Calle Principal is a symmetrical composition with two single door deep setback entrances at the first floor. The building was constructed with a shared common wall with Casa Gutierrez at 590 Calle Principal, and you can see that at the lower right-hand side. I have a photo of that. The builder, John William Miller, married Gutierrez's daughter, Ramona, and purchased the site to be his family's home. This is the north elevation and the west or rear elevation, which in the 1980s, there was a rehabilitation of the existing building and a reconstruction of the rear elevation that you see here. The project scope for rehabilitation includes minor repair of the adobe exterior, new window openings, and creation of a residential unit at the second floor. The commercial office would be converted to a mixed-use structure. Property will be partially used for its historic purpose as a residence. The proposed exterior alterations are primarily on altered secondary elevations of the building, the north and west elevations. The proposed building alterations maintain all of the historic character defining features. The project proposes to preserve the largely original east elevation along Calle Principal. Decorative woodwork, wood siding, and the period wood doors will be repaired rather than replaced. Non-original windows from the 1980s rehabilitation will be replaced at the second level. These windows are not original and are in poor condition. The replacement windows will be wood and match the existing windows. Window modifications are primarily on the west elevation, a secondary elevation altered in 1980. The proposed project adds and removes several of the rear elevation windows. The property meets the eligibility requirements for H1 in the Mills Act program, identified by qualified architectural historian to be significant and retains integrity for designation. The primary elevation at Calle Principal will remain intact. The applicant has provided a legal description and maintenance schedule. The historic preservation report includes components required by the city code. Project maintenance, repair, and alteration scope are consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. The architectural historian and staff agree with this consistency determination. The 1980 rehabilitation was not completed with photographic evidence and modifications were not character defining. Staff recommends that resolutions are adopted, recommending the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt an ordinance to rezone the property as a landmark historic resource from PCD to PCD H1, recommending that the City Council approve a Mills Act contract and approving historic permits for a rehabilitation and adoption of a historic preservation report. That concludes staff's presentation, and I know that the applicants are present.
Well, first of all, do the commissioners have any questions for the staff? I have a question. You mentioned the Gutierrez Adobe, and that's right next door. Is
It
it
is.
attached?
It is.
Is
They
there
share a
any-
wall.
Pardon?
They share a wall.
You share a wall. Is there any correspondence between them? Is there a door or,
That, I'm not sure, but we can ask the applicant.
okay, and the Gutierrez Adobe isn't part of this project?
Correct.
That's right. And is it owned by the applicant also, or is that owned by another entity?
I'm not
It's-
sure. of
It's
that.
owned by the state of California and has been for some time.
I was thinking
Mhm.
perhaps that it was, because there've been some displays there and we've been inside it for
Oh, okay.
some of the, Adobe walks over time. So that project, there isn't any connection in any way.
Correct.
I just wanted to be sure that was
Correct.
understood, and I wanted to be sure I understood it. So are there any questions of staff? Any more questions? Then we'd like to invite the applicant to share a little bit with us about your plans.
Hi, I'm Merritt Hawley. Is this on? I can't quite tell.
Be close to it.
Yeah, okay. I'm Merritt Hawley. I'm the architect for the project. Thanks for the great presentation, Christy and staff. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about the project.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
This is your time.
It was a very thorough presentation. I wanted to actually emphasize that any of the changes that we're recommending are to the area that was changed and rehabilitated in the 1980s. So the primary elevation is going to stay intact. All the changes are for the addition that was done in the 80s.
And we might have some questions.
Okay,
Carol.
on your maintenance schedule,
Mhm.
I was just curious, what are the yellow highlighted? I couldn't
Oh
see a
gosh, I need to
definition
look
for
at
that.
that. I have. What are the yellow? I think that just might be. I actually don't know what that is. I think that just might be a mistake. Sorry.
Oh, you don't know?
And,
Okay,
Are you able to bring it up, Kim, on the?
yeah, it's,
Christy, are you able to access the
packet
internet?
page
here?
112.
I think it just might be some residual highlighting that ended up there for no reason. I can't figure out what that would mean.
So we can pull it up if you just give us a couple minutes. We'll access the internet and pull it up.
Well, while it's coming up, you're basically saying that the work that you're going to be doing that results in a change actually is over the work that was done in 1980, and we don't have pictures of the before and after.
We actually, there are some pictures in the packet that show the work that was done in
There
the 80s versus,
I read that there
Yeah.
weren't somewhere, heard that.
I can-
There's the architectural story here, so if you have any questions about evolution, go get it, I can speak next.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
right here.
Okay. Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
14.
I think I even have it on my, oh, if you have a full copy, that might be better.
Yeah, I have it.
If we look at, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think I Xeroxed that page. In my report, page, where are we? There's actually a drawing in the Monterey Building Department that shows what it looked like before 1980. If you go to page 14 in my report, you'll see that there.
And I'm sorry, can you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Seth Bergstein, architectural historian. My firm is called Past Consultants. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank
great.
you.
This
Yeah.
is 14.
Well, see,
I'm
it
looking
was,
at
do you know what
14.
packet page that is? Yeah.
I can tell you. I've got it.
Yeah,
right
or
here.
it's at the, it's a separate attachment at the end.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Okay, so 18.
Right, thank
Show me
you.
again what it looks like.
It was really jumbled up. And what they did is I believe they also worked with state parks and Jim McCourt. Of course, we're all familiar with him. Did some forensic evidence. Kent Seavey was also involved in trying to figure out how construction changed in the rear. And it had been so kind of mishmashed up that essentially the design team, including some state parks representatives, did a lot of research on adobe buildings and the types of design you would see in the rear of buildings and how verandas work, and essentially did a conjectural 1980s remodel there. So it tightened it up. It looks really good, but we can't state from a preservation standpoint that it's significant. First of all, it was done in 1980. And second of all, it was not done with any photographic evidence.
So on page 139 of your packet, and Christine, you might want to bring that up as well. Well, if the HPC wants, there's a before, figure 15 shows before the remodel was done in the 1980s, and then there's after that.
Thank you.
What's the figure number?
There you go, right there. You just want. I actually show it there also. That's it after the rehabilitation. And if you go further down, you'll see both before and after.
There, it was
Oh,
just you
there,
just passed
just-
it.
There you go.
there you
There's
go.
before and after.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you can see that shed roof upper story, all that fenestration up top, even the lower infill, and the gable end facing us. It's certainly not in keeping with the Monterey colonial style, and that's the reason why I think the team. I didn't find a ton of documentation on that, but based on what I did find, and there's a detailed building chronology in the pages right up above you there to explain year by year how everything came together. So it was done based on research with some good people. I think Edna Kimbrough was involved, and but you know, it wouldn't be called a faithful reconstruction, or actually certainly would be called a restoration. It would be called a sort of an estimated reconstruction if you were looking at the standards. And our design scheme is essentially impacting those areas. There are, areas that were modified in 1980. We're not impacting any original adobe walls. None of the original walls are going to be impacted at all on the lower floor. There's interior remodel upstairs, but it's within the existing walls.
And looking at this picture with the remodeled look, I'm trying to remember now, what was the difference in the windows? There's going to be a difference at the top, right?
Well, the top windows, as far as I know, are replaced in kind. The only difference is going to be some relocation of windows underneath the veranda and within that forward-facing gable roof section.
Okay, nothing on the top will change.
Well, that, if you remember, the top is 1980. So the standards say it could change, but Merritt's doing a design of in-kind replacement of the windows. They just are not of great quality. Oh, correct.
So we're going to improve
Mhm.
the windows, but we're not going to change the top. We're going to change the windows on the bottom floor. And that's to work with the configuration inside, probably.
You may want to. Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions for? And Lori, do you have any questions? We can't hear you. Lisa.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I do not have any questions.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
I'll stick around for questions if there's any more.
That's great. So are there any public comments on the project?
Once again, to join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. The ID is 161-739-7120. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of the screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom.
While we're waiting for anyone to decide if they have a question, I just have a comment. I appreciate the owner's interest in preserving and taking care of the historic building. It's a challenge to do so, and I appreciate the efforts that are made with your firm and everyone else involved in it. It's not always easy to figure out what to do and how well to do it. And we appreciate the efforts made. Did any hands go up?
There are currently no hands raised.
Okay, do we have any other?
She just raised her hand,
Who did?
the architect. And now she's talking to Kim, so I don't know what she's doing.
If you're listening from home, we're just getting some clarification, I think. Do you have anything else you want to say? Okay. So I guess we're ready for motion. Is there anybody with any other comment?
No.
No? Ready for a motion?
Oh, sure. I would like to make a motion, or I will make a motion to accept the staff recommendation.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? We'll have to do
Go
this
ahead and do the vote.
by vote. Yeah. you do.
Chair O'Neill is absent. Vice Chair Smith Carvello,
Aye.
Commissioner Collum,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Humbero,
Aye.
Commissioner Rath,
Aye.
and Commissioner Rodriguez is absent.
So all in favor? We moved in favor of passing the resolution and
This motion carries with a vote of 5 and is appealable to the planning office within 10 days.
So I just need to make a couple of clarifications. The historic permit is appealable to the planning commission within 10 days of the date of this meeting. The historic rezoning is actually scheduled for planning commission review next Tuesday, and then it'll go on to city council automatically. The Mills contract will go on to the city council as well. So the only part that's really appealable is the historic permit and report piece.
okay, so we can say that we voted in favor of the.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I get to do that. And then, so they have Mills Act already?
No, they've applied and the city council will consider that in November. And the
Okay.
planning commission only considers the historic rezone, and that will be next Tuesday. And then the city council will also consider the historic rezone in November.
Okay, but we actually, in our work, we also have the adoption of a historic preservation report correct?
Yes, and that's a good point. The preservation report is also appealable to the planning commission. So the preservation report and the historic permit,
Okay.
otherwise that's final.
Okay, so we've taken care of everything. There won't be another,
It won't come
Motion.
back to the historic commission, so we're
okay,
good.
okay, that's great. Okay, we'll move on to our next item.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and answering our questions. Appreciate you and appreciate preserving that building and adding it to the various jewels that we're preserving in Monterey.
Mhm.
So let's go to number 6. Consider 456 Foam Street in New Monterey. There's an application HP 210155 to remove the property from the New Monterey Historic Context Statement and Reconnaissance Survey List. The applicants are Don and David Hughes. Owner is Diana Hughes Thornton, PC LH zoning district. Commercial general plan designation exempt from CEQA requirements per Article 19, Section 15305, Class 5. So let's hear the staff report.
Thank you.
Wait, excuse me, I thought this item was continued.
To November 10th.
Yeah,
So if you remember at the last meeting, the HPC did not take action on the agenda just last week. And the applicant originally indicated to us administratively that they were not going to be able to attend that meeting.
right.
So we are hearing now the agenda from October 14th. And so it can be heard this evening.
Okay,
Well, wait, I mean, that doesn't make any sense because I thought we continued it.
So you did not continue it. There was no action taken by the Historic Preservation Commission to continue it to a date certain. What we had done was contact historic commissioners. If it was going to be heard last week, we were going to hold a special meeting to address the item, but the applicant indicated when the last meeting got adjourned to this meeting that they could move forward with this meeting date.
Oh, okay, so then we do not have a meeting next Thursday.
Correct.
Okay, well, yeah, that wasn't.
And that was very confusing because, as
Yeah.
you know, we had a technical glitch last Thursday, and then we adjourned to today. We didn't anticipate any of that happening prior to last Thursday.
we had a solution for them not coming at the last meeting. This meeting is a standalone new opportunity and it seems to be moving ahead.
Okay,
That's the way I
So the
understand
good
it.
news is we don't need another meeting.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, okay, good.
Thank-
Okay, so we'll hear the staff
Thank
report.
you.
Thanks.
My name is Christy Savdo, Associate Planner with the City of Monterey. I'll be presenting 456 Foam Street for the consideration of removing 456 Foam Street from the new Monterey Historic Context Statement and Reconnaissance Survey. Staff recommends that the Historic Preservation Commission adopt the resolution to remove the property from the new Monterey Historic Context Statement and Reconnaissance Survey list. The property is located on Foam Street. The zoning is Planned Community Lighthouse Specific Plan, and the general plan land use designation is commercial. Here are pictures of the neighboring properties to 456 Foam, a single family house. And like an apartment building, please. The single family residence was constructed in 1910, has a frame structure. It's rectangular in plan with a detached garage. There's a hipped roof with composition shingles, a full width porch with 4 square wood columns, concrete steps, and there are 2 decorative scroll brackets. Most of the fenestration is double hung wood sash windows, except for a single oblong fixed wood sash window. There are some photos of the one of the side elevations and rear elevation. The property is listed in the new Monterey Reconnaissance Survey as 7R, which means not evaluated. In 2013, the Architectural Resources Group conducted the reconnaissance survey for the new Monterey area. 456 Foam was included in the survey. The property was assigned a California Historical Resources Code of 7R, meaning it was included in the reconnaissance survey but not evaluated. The survey was identified as an example of vernacular Victorian style. However, qualified professional May Clovis advises there is very little ornamentation left, such as the 2 porch brackets that align the house with vernacular Victorian. The character defining features identified for the house are vernacular cottage style, which May Clovis states that it's more in line with this style. So these character defining features include wood frame construction, Victorian era architectural style and form, gable or hipped roof, wood cladding, double hung wood sash windows, 1 or 2 story height, and partial width porch often recessed. That's the description of, in general, the vernacular cottage style. The new Monterey Reconnaissance Survey states that in order to be eligible for listing in the local, state, or National Historic Register, early 20th century expansion of New Monterey properties in the New Monterey Survey area must be significant under at least one of the following criteria. So it's national and state criteria 1, 2, and 3, and then integrity considerations. So in reviewing National Criterion A and 1 under events, patterns, and trends, in 1912, New Monterey had 325 homes, most of which were concentrated above Lighthouse Avenue and owned by working class families. Although the Ferranti house was owned by a fisherman and cannery worker, there is no evidence that it is more significant than any of the other homes associated with the theme early 20th century expansion of New Monterey. The intensive survey concludes that the Ferranti house is not eligible under National Register Criterion A, California Register Criterion 1, or events, patterns, and trends under the Monterey Historic Resource Inventory. In review of National Criterion B and State Criterion 2 under person, the intensive survey states there is no evidence in the historical record that Jack or Bessie Ferranti made any outstanding contributions to the community or the fishing or canning industries. 456 Foam Street is not eligible for listing under National Register Criterion B, California Register Criterion 2, or person Monterey Historic Resource Inventory. Under National Criterion C and State Criterion 3, Design and Construction, in order to be considered significant under National Register Criterion C, State Register Criterion 3, or Design, Construction, Monterey Historic Resource Inventory, a resource must meet at least one of the following requirements: embody distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, represent the work of a master, or possess high artistic value. Architectural historian Meg Clovis states that the Ferranti house retains some of the character-defining features of vernacular cottages as described in the context statement, and these include its wood frame construction, hipped roof, horizontal wood siding, double hung wood sash windows, and 1-story height. However, per the National Bulletin 15, if the property type is not rare and it does not clearly possess the defined characteristics required to strongly represent the context, then it must be compared with other examples of the property type. Clovis conveys that dozens of vernacular cottage-style houses were identified in the Reconnaissance Survey of New Monterey, 9 of which are included in the context statement as a good representative example. Since 456 Foam Street is missing the majority of its Victorian decorative components, and since both materials and structural integrity have been compromised, one of the many other houses in the area would be a better representative example of the context. The New Monterey Historic Context Statement states, in general, the buildings within the survey area from this period were not architect designed and thus are not eligible under this criterion as the work of a master. Finally, Clovis concludes that 456 Foam Street does not meet the third part of the criterion because it does not possess high artistic values and it does not express aesthetic ideals or design concepts. In summary, 456 Foam Street is not eligible for listing under the National Register Criterion C, State Register Criterion 3, or Design Construction under the Monterey Historic Resource Inventory. Under integrity, has summarized in the intensive survey that although the evaluation for integrity is not usually a consideration for properties that do not meet the 3 eligibility criteria, it should be mentioned here that the setting and feeling of 456 Foam Street have been severely compromised. Setting is the physical environment of a historic property. The setting was once a neighborhood of working class homes. Today, the block of Foam Street between Drake and McClellan Avenues is dominated by large hotel complexes. Feeling is a property's expression of a historic sense of a particular time, in this case, early 20th century New Monterey. The modest homes that define the original working class neighborhood on this block of Foam Street have disappeared, and the Ferrante House can no longer convey this particular period of time. The intensive survey concludes that the property at 456 Foam Street does not meet any of the criteria for significance for the national or state Register of Historic Resources, the City of Monterey's new Monterey Historic Context Statement and Reconnaissance Survey, and the Monterey Historic Zoning Ordinance and Historic Record do not support the eligibility of 456 Foam Street for inclusion in the city's adopted survey list of H2 zoning. The properties are not historic resources as defined by SEQA. Staff recommends that the Historic Preservation Commission approve the removal of the property from the new Monterey Historic Context Statement and Reconnaissance Survey. That concludes staff's presentation. I know that the applicant has prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation and would like to present that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Should we see if, do any commissioners want to have any questions for Christy regarding the staff report before we move on?
I actually have a question, Christy.
Sure.
When, I know in the report that the historian did, she talked about integrity, and I walked around the house the other day, and I'm not a professional historian or anything, but it looked like it was in just as good a condition as the one on Belden Street, or in just as poor condition, I should say. But the only part that looks like it's failing in integrity is on the porch, but the rest of the house. So is that evaluated by the city at all, or is that just an opinion? Or
No, the integrity is part of the architectural historian's evaluation. And it's included in the intensive survey. That she just covered feeling and setting. Typically, when a property doesn't meet the criteria, any of the 3 criteria, the architectural historian doesn't evaluate integrity because you can't be deemed significant if you only meet integrity.
Yeah, I'd like to add just a little bit to this. So integrity doesn't really involve building condition most of the time. So there's 7 aspects to integrity. Is the building in its original location? Does it convey, what is its setting? Does it have a feeling? Anyways, there's 7 aspects to integrity that historians usually evaluate. And condition doesn't usually come up as a reason to delist a building. So what the historian, and I believe the project historian Meg Clovis is on the line and can represent her own findings as well. We've taken an attempt to summarize them, but she does not believe that the building qualifies under the California or National Register based on the criteria. So it's a little bit different than building condition.
okay.
Did you just say
California or National Register
or
criteria.
national? Okay.
Correct. Our
Sounded like
zoning code
international,
requires
I thought.
evaluation under both.
Okay.
And they're very
Or
similar,
national.
to be honest. They are reflective of each other. Christy, do you mind enlarging the council chamber so
Sure.
people can see? Great. And then
Okay.
we're probably ready to hear from the applicant if the chair so deems.
Should we hear from the applicant? Are there any other commissioner questions of staff? We'll have a chance, of course, to ask questions of the applicant too.
Sure.
Let's move ahead to applicant.
Let me pull up their presentation.
The applicant is on the line and I will allow them to talk.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you for the time. So we are here due to our application request to remove the property from the new Monterey Reconnaissance Survey.
Did you identify yourself before going forward for?
Yes,
people?
yes, I'm sorry. I'm Dawn Piazza, and I'm the daughter-in-law of the owners of 456 Foam Street.
Thank you.
So on the next slide, Christy. Basically, of course, I'm not here to discuss any of the historical findings. The city had hired the historian Meg Clovis to conduct the intensive survey, and she's here to answer your questions on a professional note. But for myself, I'm personally here because I wanted to address some of the inaccurate statements that were sent in the letters of concern that I reviewed to this committee. So one of the letters of concern stated that the property had been inhabited in April of this year. And I wanted to make it very clear that we had moved my in-laws out of the property in November of 2019. The property has remained vacant since. And the reason that we did move them out of the property is because the city had deemed it uninhabitable a few days prior. So there was a notice posted on the door. We got a corrective notice. We came, we moved our folks out of the property. And you can see from the bullet points there that they had multiple reasons to provide a corrective action and for our in-laws to be vacated. Next slide.
I couldn't read the statement. It was too faint.
In the bullet points there, basically for the corrective action, it does state, and it's a little bit more detailed on the next slide, which is legible, but it was right. So after the corrective action, they followed up by the notice and order to vacate due to unsafe to occupied. A day after, they provided this letter to us, and it was a little bit more detailed. You can see 1 through 7 that I blew up for you. So basically the front porch and roof was falling and the structural members were sagging, deteriorated wood and decay. The porch entry to the porch is unstable and may fail at any moment. There was an accumulation of rubbish and garbage in the interior and exterior and the garage of the property. There was an infestation of rodents in the property. There wasn't smoke alarms and carbon monoxide. The kitchen and the bathrooms were not maintained in a sanitary or safe functioning condition. In fact, they were without water. And then given the fact that there was so much debris that they couldn't even check the electrical system, it was warranted that there could be electrical and mechanical issues, deeming them not functional. So the property was deemed by the city as not safe to occupy. My in-laws were moved out and nobody has occupied the property since. Next slide. So Christy, you can push play here, and we basically have hundreds of pictures showing the state of the property. I just tried to pick the ones that, kind of set the tone that says, there's a thought that there's a solid structure here. What we really have is we have a ceiling that's caving in and that's cracked, water damage throughout the entire property. It's a 2-bedroom home, and each room, these are ceiling pictures from each of the rooms and the living area showing the cracks. Then with the roof, you can see that the roof is caving in. There's areas around the entire property that's rotted, and there's holes in the roof, in the trellises, the overhang, holes there, missing boards, decayed wood. This is just our walkthrough around, taking our own pictures of the decay and the broken pieces there. And then That's the hole in the roof at the top of the attic. And then the porch sagging, so that's got to be careful going there. The steps are also cracked and sunken. The garage is pretty much rotted wood all around. It has non-functioning side door, and the garage door is barely hanging on. The foundation has visible cracks through our walkthrough. You can see these are quite large that we were able to just photograph for you here. Just wanted to, address that to say it's a solid structure is a real stretch. So I wanted to just correct that based on, somebody else's opinion. The next slide. The letter of concern also stated that there's attractive wood moldings around the original double hung windows. And, basically most of the wood moldings are warped and water damaged. And you can see that the window frames from the inside, this is the inside of the property, were chewed by the infestation of rodents in the property. The next slide. The letter of concern also stated that the floors and the walls are in good shape. This is a picture of the plywood subfloor exposed in the kitchen, soiled with rodent urine. It's down to the plywood, very iffy floor there. This is a picture of the bathroom that is a walk-through Jack and Jill bathroom that we don't walk through because if we fear of stepping through and landing in the basement or the crawl space, and then water damage throughout the other areas of the floor in the living room, and the plaster basically coming off the walls in multiple areas as well. So in summary, I just wanted to restate that the property is vacant. It was deemed unsafe to be living in, and it has been vacant since we moved my in-laws out in November of 2019. The structure is not solid or sound, in my humble opinion, and the wood moldings were warped and chewed. The floor and the walls are in very poor condition. We don't really even know the extent of that condition. We haven't done inspections, for any of the other common items such as mold or all of those other items that can come when you have property that's not maintained or that has water damage. The property is not safe to occupy. So I just wanted to address the letters that came and make sure that you had a clear view on the reality and not what was stated in one of the letters that was submitted to this committee.
Are you able to hear us?
Yes.
Take questions from
Yes.
the commissioners?
I have a question.
Okay, Kathy Cullum.
I was just wondering, before you moved your in-laws out, did this house look like this? The walls, the floors, etc.?
So my father-in-law had been diagnosed with dementia. We thought my mother-in-law was in a state to take care of them both. And it became very apparent, they stopped letting us come visit. They always came, because we're a 2-hour drive from them, they always came to us and stopped letting us visit. So we had not seen the property until we got a call from the city to come and pick up my in-laws. So the property has been not really well maintained or cared for a decade or more.
Thank you very much.
And my in-laws are very comfortable in their assisted living home that we have them in now. My father-in-law's in memory care and my mother-in-law's in assisted living.
Just a comment, one of the findings from the last time we rejected taking a property off the historic list was that just because a house is dilapidated, that's not by itself grounds to take it off the list. However, according to Meg Clovis, there are many other better examples of the vernacular Victorian style. So then it would have a bearing on it that way.
Are we doing comments now or just questions?
It's commissioner questions to the applicant, or we could move into comments. I guess in terms of, does the public have any questions for the applicant comes first, so we could at least put that out there. And again, you could let them know how.
Once again, to join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864 and then enter the webinar ID. The ID for this meeting is 161-739-7120. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. As of right now, I don't see any hands raised.
Well, let me kind of set the stage a little bit. There were a couple of letters, and I don't know if all the commissioners were able to see the notice that there were letters that had been sent and then you could go into a program and
I saw the notice, but I could not find the letters.
you couldn't find the letters.
No.
Well, there were, I made copies of a couple of them, and I'm happy to pass them around. I think that's what the owner's representative was referring to. There were letters sent, and she was challenging the letter from, looking at the inside of the house. And so it's kind of good to set the stage and say there were these letters, and we were informed of them, but it's another step to go into the letter process in the city's, I don't know what you'd call it, trail for information that we have to follow.
Yeah, it
So-
may be appropriate, and I really appreciate you bringing up the letters. I don't know if there's any more public comment, but maybe just to take like a 1 or 2 minute break and allow commissioners to read those letters if they haven't had
That
an
would be
opportunity.
Yeah, that's what, that's
would
what
be
I
great. Thank
wanted. I
you.
think we're kind of lost if we haven't read the letters and then we see the program. And I do appreciate Kathy's question of the applicant. How could this house get this dilapidated in such a short period of time with people living in it? So that helps answer the question for us. And I'm sorry that happened to your family, that they were in this house.
Geraldine, since we're taking a break, could I take a quick break?
Oh, I guess so. Is that all right if the commissioner takes a
Yeah.
quick break?
Yes, we can take maybe a 5-minute break.
Okay,
So we'll reconvene at 5:35.
okay. Should I turn my mic off for a minute?
You can shut off your mic, but it continues to be broadcast during the Zoom.
quick break. So when we left, we were talking about some letters that had come in, and I want to say thanks to the letter writers. They were, you took some time to think about it, and we wanted to take some time to read the letters, and that's what we did during the time we weren't in session. And the process for us is that when letters come in, we have to go to a different screen to look them up, and we're just getting used to that process. So let's see where we are. Are we ready for more discussion on this? I
have
think
some
that's
comments. I have some comments.
okay, good.
I don't believe public comment has been announced for this item. Oh, it has for this
I
item.
think we did.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, we're getting a little confused of all the different steps.
Right.
I think we did announce public comment.
Now would be the time for commissioner comments then.
Yes, that's correct. It's commissioner comments.
Okay.
And go ahead.
Okay, just a couple things. I think there's some good points that have been brought up, and after talking about the Belden property, I think we need to be consistent, and that just because the property is in poor condition should not be a reason to remove it from the list. And I was walking through the area the other day and noticed a plaque I'd like to read that's been posted on one of the vernacular cottages that have been rehabilitated. And it basically, it says, Cannery Row contained a mix of uses, canneries, warehouses, railroads, and residential properties that supported the cannery industry. This area of Cannery Row contained a variety of single-family homes. Typical of the era, the original structure on the site was a one-story vernacular hip roof cottage with unpainted board and batten siding. Today, you can look around and continue to see this unique relationship of larger cannery buildings and smaller residential structures. And this is on the at 498 Wave Street on this building there. And the reason I bring that up is that, in the report, it talks about how it's all just hotels, and that's not actually true. There's about 32 single family houses. A lot of them are these vernacular cottages that are still up, and it gives you that feeling, that sense of history. And that's what I think we should be protecting as a commission, is that sense of history for that area.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment?
I would.
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
Sorry.
There I am. Here I am. Okay. I've also enjoyed driving down that street for years and looking at that cottage, because I really think it reflects the history of Monterey in many ways. It's unfortunate that it has been allowed to deteriorate, and I certainly understand the situation. But in my opinion, anything can be fixed. I noticed that the applicant has it on the market, and whatever photos that are in the market listing, they look good, but obviously they didn't show everything, because they're trying to sell it. So my concern would be that, if we allow buildings to be taken off the list just because they're deteriorated, well, that kind of encourages people to let their buildings deteriorate. And I think that if it was kept on the list, there might be some options for whoever buys this property. Because as far as I know, and I did check with the water district today, you can add on to a single family house, and you can get an additional bathroom by doing some different kinds of fixtures that are low flow. And then, so this house could be expanded and have an additional bathroom. It could be expanded, and also, because if it was historic, then it could get the Mills Act to fix the front part of it, I believe. So I would just encourage the applicant to rethink that it might actually be better to keep it on the historic context list. And at some time, whoever owns it, a Mills Act, if it, you know, if it was historic. Because we're taking it off the list. That's what our projected object is right now. But I don't think it's a good idea to take it off the list. Besides, right next to it is another, you know, 2-story Victorian, not very much ornamentation, very simple, that at some point caught on fire, but it's still standing and it could be fixed as well, because with Wave Street, they have fixed up a lot of buildings, and even the hotel that's on Foam Street, it's not like really tall or really big. It doesn't really detract from that cottage. And, you know, that is the way people live. This is the way our history of Cannery Row area came into being, and other little cottages up the hill. So I would hate to see the loss of this house, and I would like to see it stay on the list.
Thank you.
So I would be opposed to taking it off the list.
Okay, thank you, Lori. You did a good job from afar, making your contribution. Thanks. Carol.
Yeah, it's Dawn again. If you can still hear me.
Yes.
So yeah, I understand what you're saying about that look and feel, but also, and not wanting to make just the dilapidated part be a main issue, because obviously the historian has also said that there is no historic events that occurred. There's no important historic figures that lived there. The architectural design was not significant. So we can't make something that's not fitting the professional's view historic just because we think it's a cute, quaint blue cottage. I thought it was really cute in 1998 when my in-laws bought it, but it did, just those items alone aren't enough to make it historic if it's not relative. So I don't know if Meg is there, but it would probably be a great time to hear from her.
Okay, but I need to let you know that we did have a time for your applicant presentation, and then we asked for public comments.
Got
And
it.
we're in the commissioner comments category of this. So I have to ask our leadership if we can actually hear or go back to allow other people to speak.
We also do have the architectural historian on the line, May Clovis, and she was never, I don't think she spoke before when
She
you.
hasn't, but we asked for people to speak,
Yeah.
the applicant or
May-
others at
May
the time,
Clovis.
and she didn't speak.
So Vice Chair Crivello, you have the option as the chair of the meeting. You've opened and closed the public comment period and brought it back to commissioner comments. If you want to reopen the public hearing, then anyone that, you have to reopen it for everybody so multiple people can speak. So that's completely at your discretion.
Okay, just a moment. What do you think, commissioners? Do we reopen it to allow for any other comment by the applicant? We did hear one, so in a way we should say. Because I think if it's up to me, since the applicant kind of just spoke out, not really understanding the process, that we should formally go back to that, because she did speak and we shouldn't keep other people from speaking. So let's go back to the comment. I guess we're in the application area of our agenda, and we're open to public comments. So the applicant spoke and gave us a very nice presentation of the condition of the building, really very nice. I mean, you could feel like you were right there walking around with her. And now we're in the public comments. So if Meg or anyone else in the public would like to speak, this is the time.
Good evening, commissioners. This is Meg Clovis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I do want to make the point that the building is deteriorated, but this is not a point of deterioration. That's not the problem here. It's a question of significance. And so when you evaluate properties, as you well know, you use Bulletin 15, and a property must strongly represent its context. Now, in this context, and this is a specific context identified by ARG, who did your New Monterey context statement, it's the early 20th century expansion of New Monterey, which is from 1902 to 1923. So there were 125 buildings that were identified to represent this context. And the surveyors identified 9 properties that they really felt were very good, and that they included in on page 50 of the context statement of representative examples of the vernacular cottage, like this one. All of these were given the CRIS code of 5S3, which means that they felt at that time that these properties were individually eligible for listing as H2 properties. So it was my job to do that comparison as required by Bulletin 15 to compare this property with the 5S3 properties. And it just doesn't represent the context as strongly as these. And in fact, I have to tell you, I've gone through every single survey form, and there, from this theme, early 20th century expansion of New Monterey, there are some really great examples that strongly represent the context and would do a much better job of representing the context than this property, 456 Foam. So as I said, it's not a matter of how deteriorated the property is the question is, does it strongly represent its context? In other words, is it significant? So I can take any questions if anybody has one.
I have a question. Since New Monterey was settled by cannery workers primarily and some fishermen, that these houses are not going to be necessarily, if we're looking for houses representing that group, grand houses made by master craftsmen and impressive to the general public. They're going to be more humble and vernacular, whether it's a cottage or or not. But they're going to be normal houses for the people that do that work at that time. And I think when we look at a house that's over 100 years old, we should give it attention. And I appreciate the letters and the comments that people are making. I think it's good to take some time and look at it. I don't think every house we save needs to have an important person to have lived in it. I think it can represent, we need some representation of humble houses as well as fancy ones. And I hear sometimes from you and others more of an emphasis on the fancy structures that we all ooh and ah over because they're so magnificent. I think in a neighborhood that was developed by working people, we need examples of the houses of those people. And I wonder what you might say to that.
I would say that all the examples that I gave you are all humble working class cottages. They're all one story, they're clapboard, they have either a hipped roof or a front gabled roof, very simple. That's what the New Monterey survey and context statement is all about, is working class neighborhoods. And so those are the resources that were identified during the survey. So none of these properties that I've mentioned, the 5S3 properties, are magnificent properties by a long stretch, but they are good representatives of the context.
So in New Monterey, do we have 125 properties that are examples of this type of property?
There are a total of 350 properties that were identified in the survey. And the survey is divided into different contexts and so different periods of time. So this period of time that we're talking about is 1902 to 1923. Within that period of time, 1902 to 1923, there are 125 residential structures, all very humble, all very vernacular, that represent this context.
I guess I didn't make it clear. Do we still have 125 homes of this
I
type?
will say that a couple within the I'll just mention within the 9 that are on page 50 of the context statement, there was 151 Hawthorne Street, which was given the CRIS code of 5S3. It was removed from the survey. I do not know why. It was an excellent example. I don't know the backstory on that one, but yes, there are a couple have been removed, including that 151 Hawthorne.
Right now, we don't have that number close at hand, how many might be left from that time. But thank you for thinking about it. Do we have any other comments or questions of Meg from the commissioners? Here's Carol
Oh,
Dawson.
sorry. When we look back at 999 Belden, the reason we refused to take it off, or one of the reasons we did not did not want it taken off the list, was because it maintained its integrity. And I hate to say this, but I mean, this house actually looks like it does retain a lot of integrity. That's got the wood siding, the double hung windows, the railing. Most of it does look like it does maintain its historic integrity.
So before we transition into commissioner comments, are there any other members of the public on the line that would like to speak on this item that have their hand raised?
I do see one hand raised, and I will allow Nancy Runyon to talk.
Hello, commissioners. This is Nancy Runyon, and I did write one of the letters that you received. And I do live in the New Monterey neighborhood. And I don't think that you need to have to be California or National Register eligible to really contribute to the character of the neighborhood. And I think that this cute cottage really does contribute to that. And it's a prime example. I think most of the other examples that we've been talking about of these fishermen cottages are high up the hill, and therefore do not really relate to the Cannery Row neighborhood. Cannery Row has just a few houses here and there throughout the area that give it its feeling. And in fact, the big Cannery Row warehouse that was built behind this house was built about 1910. So it was always been a neighborhood that's been very, very mixed. So I think this, even though the pictures sure show a lot of cosmetic damage, it is all repairable without a structural engineer's report showing that it's not a sound structure. I think everything could be repaired. And I think this is an important example to keep in our neighborhood. So I hope that you will consider that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nancy. And I know you were also active in the neighborhood association. Did the neighborhood association have an opinion?
So just checking with our secretaries, are there any other public comments?
I did, but perhaps she didn't hear.
We've just helped her unmute. So Nancy, if you heard the question, you can please provide an answer if you have one.
Our neighborhood right now is inactive because of the pandemic. The board is very small, and a lot of us don't want to attend meetings. And so we really don't have a clear answer, but I have been on the neighborhood board for more years than I have not. And I certainly understand, and I sat on the Lighthouse specific plan ad hoc committee for many years. This neighborhood is very important for us to keep the the few houses that are down there left. And having an example of a fisherman's cottage up the hill just doesn't quite do it for Cannery Row.
Okay, any other questions of Nancy from the commissioners, or any other questions from, or presentations from other people that are on Zoom?
Once again, to provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
I'm always looking for some kind of order or way to make decisions. And it's confusing to me and maybe some of the other commissioners. We get reports that say the house should be saved. And we try to do the best we can to look at all the materials and consider it in different ways. Sometimes experts say houses that have been plastered over should not be saved because without the original wood showing, it's not the same house. Other times they say, actually, they should be saved because now it's within that historical time period, and that was something that was done, especially from the people coming from the Mediterranean, representing the Italians, and they added a more Mediterranean feeling to the houses. But here we have one that predates most of the houses that we're talking about, although not the adobes. And it, we really want to think about it and make sure we're doing the right thing by it. It would, Nancy brought out a point that I'm interested in, maybe having a structural engineer give an opinion in terms of the rehabilitation would be helpful in these cases. We don't usually get that. It's not one of the things that usually comes up that we read, that, whether or not it's sound enough to be structurally rehabilitated.
Can I make a comment? We had just had that great HP, I forget what it was called, that training that we had about the standards, and there was one of the examples that they had was that building that actually burnt down, or mostly burnt down, and they restored it. So again, I don't think that it's the integrity that we need to look at. It's the house and the character of the neighborhood, and things can be fixed. The house isn't falling down completely. Outside it looks pretty okay. So I think it could be fixed up, and we could keep it on the list as an example. If we take it off the list, it could be torn down, then it will be gone forever.
Happy.
I like the idea of what you said about the structural engineer. I'm wondering about the water too. According to the lady's report, the daughter-in-law, I guess, there was some doubt about whether or not the water was working or what. But that's an important thing to consider in this county is, water credits and all that. I'm wondering about that too.
So I'll just clarify for water credits run with the property. And so based on the numbers of sinks and toilets that are in the site, even if they're non-operable, most times those credits still run with the land.
Okay.
So I don't think there's really an issue with water credits unless you're trying to expand, right? If you're trying to add additional bathrooms and sinks and toilets, then there's a couple of incentives the water district has for a master bathroom, but for the most part, you're limited to the number of fixtures in the existing building. So I think the focus of your decision really today, and it sounds like you're debating this, is whether or not it qualifies for as a California or National Register eligible. It's not a demolition permit. If you decide to keep it on the list and maybe it goes through the appeal process and the city keeps it on the list, you still can apply to demolish the building. It's just, it changes the environmental review process for that structure. So the way the city code was established in our program, was that we wanted to do neighborhood-based surveys. And on some of those surveys, it's really clear to the historian as they're doing it that it qualifies for National or California Register. And so you'll see those formal determinations as part of that survey. In other cases like this, it receives, I think it's a 7R rating, saying that before that we probably should go back and look at it before additional steps are taken with the property. So we tried to create a program where we're thinking on a neighborhood or context-based level, and then we get down to the individual building. So if the commission, and it sounds like you have two options, you can decide to keep it on the Reconnaissance survey list, and I would recommend you adopt findings for decision, or you can accept the staff recommendation and take it off the list. You have two options before you. I just ask that you have a decision with supported findings.
Okay,
Can I
so
ask Kim something about the voting? I've never abstained before, Kim, on anything in over 3 years. What would happen if I abstained?
I believe that's your call. We usually encourage commissioners to vote, even if you're conflicted. Unless you have a conflict of interest, obviously, then we ask you not to abstain. So if we encourage you to vote, we encourage you, but to provide reasons and findings for your decision. And so we can represent those. If I imagine this will, if it is denied, it'll go on appeal to Planning Commission and Council. It's helpful for us to be able to represent the Historic Preservation Commission's viewpoint, because sometimes staff has a different viewpoint on the application. So just, make sure to represent your decision with findings.
well, we might have more discussion. Is there more discussion?
One more thing, I think to Linda's point, we need to be consistent because some of the houses that have been approved for Mills Act contracts have been, in my mind, changed pretty drastically, so they don't even look the same as they did originally. So if we're, you can't have it both ways. I mean, this house seems to me to maintain a lot of its historic integrity, and it hasn't been modified.
It's very true.
That's noticeable.
We have more discussion, and then we'll have a motion. I think most of you have had a chance. We've all talked. So are we ready for a motion? I can't make a motion. You have to make a motion.
I can attempt to.
Okay,
Okay, I move to not approve the request to remove the subject residents from the reconnaissance survey. And the findings would be the house contributes to the character of the neighborhood and the uniqueness of Monterey in the wide variety of houses represented. And it's important to protect the individual houses. Let's see,
you might add.
I like what you said, Carol, about the house maintains the integrity of the neighborhood, or the one that you said for Belden Street. I can't remember everything that you said, but
Oh, I wrote it down. You mean from the 999?
but you added a few things about number 4.
Okay, yeah, we can, okay, where is that? I need to find it.
Well, I'll just try to finish.
Yeah.
Okay, so the house maintains the integrity of the original setting and the neighborhood. And the fact the house is dilapidated should not disqualify it from being historic. How does that
Yeah,
sound?
and then we might also add that this is one of the few examples in the Cannery Row area of New Monterey.
Yes, I like that.
Without any structural changes too. It hasn't had any changes.
It looks like it's intact.
So um, we need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, Carol Dawson seconded the motion. So all in favor?
I'll call the vote. Chair O'Neill is absent. Vice Chair Smith Carvello.
Aye.
Commissioner Collins,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Humbero,
Aye.
Commissioner Rath,
Aye.
and Commissioner Rodriguez is absent.
Motion carries.
So this decision is appealable to the Planning Commission on forms available in the planning office and our website. And the appeal has to be filed within 10 days of the date of the decision.
Okay, so we've completed this part of the agenda, but we have a space here for commissioner comments about other things of interest. And then after that, we'll have staff. I have a comment. I was volunteering recently at the Stone House for San Carlos. We have a food pantry there. And I happened to notice that we're missing the entire old church hall. It's been completely, it's just gone. It used to be there and now it's not there. And it hasn't come to us in any way as in point of information or anything. And I can't imagine that it wasn't old enough to be considered historic. So I'm curious about how that, it seemed to miss our, Historic Preservation Commission, so it must have traveled a different route. But I'd like to know what that route was and what happened.
So during the process of the adoption of the Downtown Historic Survey, properties were removed as not historic, and determinations were made by the Historic Preservation Commission during that process. So it was not a potentially historic building. So it was formally removed during that process.
What year was that?
I'd have to go back and look. I believe it was around 2012,
Okay,
maybe a little bit earlier.
And so it was built more recently than it appeared.
No, it was an older structure, but for various reasons at the time, it was taken off the historic preservation list.
Okay. It always looked old to me and it's historic. I didn't know. Thanks.
Sure, no problem.
Any other commissioner questions or reports or?
I have a question.
Oh. Lori?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Carol, taken.
Okay, so
Let's let Lori go.
what I've noticed is that in New Monterey, okay, we have a lot of buildings that were over 50 years old when this particular reconnaissance survey was done. But now years have passed and we have more buildings that are over 50 years old.
Right.
And I was just wondering if there can be like an update to the reconnaissance survey.
The Historic Preservation Commission during the budgetary session can obviously request that the city council fund updates to its historic surveys. And there's this, we have several historic surveys. The downtown is the most recently, I believe, completed. We have Oak Grove, Upper and Lower Old Town. We have New Monterey, Cannery Row. We've never surveyed sort of the Monterey Vista neighborhood. Alta Mesa neighborhood was finished. Actually, I think maybe that was the most recent. We received a grant. So, it's always a challenge with funding. We've been consistently applying for grants as they become available at the state level. And that's where we're at. I think, and maybe the commission wants to agendize this for a future meeting where we can talk about the historic surveys that have been done. If you might find that we would recommend that maybe a new neighborhood that hasn't been surveyed should be the next one surveyed. It'd be nice to update everything, but it's always a pretty substantial cost to bring in historians and update the documentation.
I have another question then. So let's just say that you know that your building is way over 50 years old, but somehow it was not picked up on the context survey. You know, they just drove by and didn't write it down or whatever. Is it possible to ask for it to be, you know, like to go through a process of historic whatever? I'm not making sense, but you know, I'll be specific. Okay, that, you know, my building was missed and I was very shocked about it. Okay. And so I didn't do anything about it, but I would like it to be on the context list. Not necessarily to have it made historic, but to be on the context list, because I would like to write something about it and why it's historical and what it's related to, because I know. So anyway, I don't know if that's an option or not.
So it's the
But
same
there's
process
a,
as taking a property off the reconnaissance survey list to put one on as a historic survey is prepared. It can be a windshield type survey by a qualified historian though. So property owners and residents and interested members of the public cannot just submit something and amend our historic surveys, but if a qualified professional is hired and it comes out that it is potentially, you know, that it deserves to be on the list and it was, then that list is actively amended, as you know.
That's great.
okay. All right. That makes sense.
Is it, and I don't mean this in any way directed toward Lori, but recently one of our commissioners took himself off our commission because his property was going to be the subject of the commission. Would it be normal if you were going to present it? How would you continue being a member but abstain, or would it be better to do it if you want a commission?
So you would just disqualify yourself for that item as it was being considered. So, you know, we all might, it's very frequent on various decision-making bodies. You may own a property within a certain distance, or it may actually be your house. You may be submitting your application to go to the Architecture Review Committee or Historic Preservation Commission or Planning Commission. And what the state law says is that you have to announce your conflict of interest. So you could say, I own this property and I have a conflict of interest, and then you have to leave the council chambers for that deliberation. And that's typically with financial conflicts of interest and distance is a big issue. So that doesn't stop you from being on the commission. Sometimes the Mills Act is a little bit different. If somebody is going through a Mills Act process and is potentially going to obtain a financial incentive, there have been commissioners that have recused themselves based on that.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up, Lori. That was an interesting discussion.
Okay. We've had some property owners of Mills Act properties who have not done work that they promised to do when they signed the Mills Act contract. I don't know, is there any way we can require people to do the work before? Well, of course, they're supposed to use the money from the tax savings in order to be doing the work, but we need to have a better way of tracking these properties, because one in particular, which I guess it burned down.
Correct.
But they had the Mills Act contract for more than a year and they hadn't done anything.
So to give the commission, one of my updated items was going to be at the December HPC meeting. We will have, we've started the inspections of all our Mills Act properties. We're doing about 2 a week. And we will be bringing to you a status report. We have a new planner we've hired. I'm excited for him that so he's visiting them, he's evaluating all the contracts, and we'll be bringing you a progress report periodically on what we're doing. The property you're discussing, they actually had a year to file that application after the Mills Act contract was recorded, and their year was coming up by January 1st, and we had been working with them in the last couple of months to have them submit the applications. They were not really, well, anyways, I'll just say we were working through that. And then unfortunately, that house, I believe, has been determined to be 100% loss. So we will be potentially bringing back to the commission a cancellation of the Mills Act contract. We're waiting for fire reports and other things. So that has to by contract go through a public hearing process. So I don't want you to prejudge about whether it should come on or off the list, but
Yeah.
that will be potentially coming forward.
Well, I mean, and to add insult to injury, that particular property was income property. Both sides were rented. And they still didn't, I mean, so they were making money. And-
Well, we
and
can talk
taking the
about that
tax
at the
advantage.
actual
Yeah,
hearing for that property. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot more information to perhaps share,
yeah,
but,
okay.
Okay,
but your bigger question was, should the city require rehabilitation before it becomes a Mills Act property?
Well, I
think-
don't think they can realistically because you need to have the tax savings in order to do the repairs.
So we could agendize that. We could have that
Yeah.
conversation on whether or not you want to recommend changing the city's program. Not against that. I'm just saying we would need to
Mhm.
talk about that in more depth.
okay. Anybody else? Should we move to staff reports?
Okay, just really quickly, a couple things to be aware of. Our next HPC meeting was going to be on November 11th. That is actually Labor Day, so we're canceling that meeting.
Veterans.
Oh, Veterans Day, thank you. And the tentative agenda for December 9th will include the CLG Annual Report. The good news is Fernanda will be back for that meeting, and so she'll be presenting that annual report. We will need everybody's educational achievements in the last year, so we can include in that report. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to be providing you an update on Mills Act inspections, because I know that's been a goal of the Historic Commission that we haven't achieved for at least a couple of years. But the good news is we were able to hire the planner to fill the vacancy, and in a couple of weeks, we'll be fully up to staff again in the planning office after about 2 years, year and a half since COVID with not being in that
That's great.
position. So we're really excited.
I think that's great. If there's anything else,
So the education report.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Laura.
I have a question for Kim about the education. I think it's tomorrow and the next day. Online. And I
Yes.
submitted, the application, but I haven't heard anything back. So
I just
I'm
received
getting a little
confirmation
concerned.
email this morning. You may want to check in your email. So there's a free webinar, I think, being offered through the city of Sacramento that I had sent out to everybody. I've been trying to send all of those as they come up over the year, so you can choose what you want to do. And I just received my confirmation this morning, Lori, so I look forward to attending tomorrow morning and Friday morning.
Okay. Okay. I'll check my junk mail. Okay.
So the report needs to go to who? And should it be sent email or how?
We just need a simple email. You can just email it directly to Fernanda and maybe copy Erica Barrera. And just say I attended X session on this date, and then we can make sure to include your education report in the CLG.
And what are the dates? I mean, does it go September to, or, yeah, what?
Oh, the dates of the report. You know what? We will send those out to you because they're odd.
Yeah.
They're a little bit off. They're not a calendar year and not a fiscal year, and I always forget.
Yeah.
I would also appreciate, because I didn't make a list of the ones you recommended and the ones I responded to. I'm going to have to go back, and
yeah.
it's a good way to keep track of them is what I need, because we just do them so frequently. We're probably forgetting some of them, but
So, next year, if you want, is as you attend them, if you want to send an email to Fernanda, and then we can try to keep that for you.
Oh,
We'd be
that's a good
happy to
idea.
do that if we knew.
Thank you.
And that includes, doesn't it, Kim, the library?
Yeah, anything related to
Right.
historic
I've been writing them
preservation.
down. I've done quite a few of those,
Yeah.
actually.
Great, fantastic.
Thanks. I think unless anyone has an objection, we'll close the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carolyn.